Good morning, everyone. Mishnah on Yud Zayin Amud Aleph. The Mishnah says, Yesh neder besoch neder ve'ein shvua besoch shvua. So the Mishnah is going to discuss whether two nedarim can take effect or two shvuas can take effect. So Yesh neder besoch neder ve'ein shvua besoch shvua. A neder can take effect over or with an existing neder of the same type. But a shvua does not take effect over or together with an existing shvua of the same type. Ketzad, what's the case? Amar hareini nazir im ochel, hareini nazir im ochel. I will become a nazir if I eat. I will become a nazir if I eat. He says it twice. Ve'achal, and he eats. Chayav al kol achas ve'achas. So he's chayav for both, and he becomes a nazir twice. What does it mean he becomes a nazir twice? He becomes a nazir for 30 days, and when the 30 days is over, so he becomes a nazir for another 30 days. That's yesh neder besoch neder. There's two nedarim that go one after the other. If you take two nedarim of the same exact type, same exact words, then both of them are chal, yesh neder besoch neder, and one starts right after the other one. Shvua shelo ochel, shvua shelo ochel. But if you take a shvua that I won't eat, twice in the same, right after another, so then we said ein shvua besoch shvua, and therefore ein chayav ela achas. If you go ahead ve'achal and you eat, ein chayav ela achas, you're only chayav one. What does that mean? Seemingly you're only chayav one malchus. Fine. Amar Afuna. So we're going to clarify, again, there's a difference between taking a neder and a shvua. So we're going to clarify what we mean, yesh neder besoch neder, that a neder can take effect over an existing neder of the same sort. And we're going to clarify what we mean when we say yesh neder besoch neder versus ein shua besoch shua. Amar Afuna lo shanu ela da amar reini nazir ayom reini nazir lamachar. When we say that the two naziras take place, and he's just changing the case a little bit, but it's the same case. In the Mishnah it says hareini nazir im ochel, hareini nazir im ochel. Over here he's just saying hareini nazir, I'm a nazir. So hareini nazir ayom, hareini nazir lamachar. When we say that two nedarim can take place at the same time, that's only when you say hareini nazir ayom, I'm going to become a nazir today, and I'm going to become a nazir tomorrow. Fine. Why? Demigo de kamitos of yoma yisera chaylal naziras al naziras. He agrees that yesh neder besoch neder, that two nedarim can take effect. However, he says that there needs to be a time when the naziros can be chal, the second neder. What does that mean? So he explains that if you took two nedarim, hareini nazir hayom, hareini nazir hayom, if you took two of the same neder, I'm a nazir today, I'm a nazir today, then there's no time for that second one to take effect, because on Maisa you're making both at the same exact time. But if you say hareini nazir hayom, hareini nazir lamachar, so very interestingly, what does he say? Well, when's the first one going to take effect? Today. And that's going to last for 30 days. Now what happens on day number 31? On day number 31, you're in the last day of the second hareini nazir lamachar, because hareini nazir lamachar takes effect on day number 2. And if naziros are 30 days, it means on day number 31, the first set of 30 is over. But the second set of 30, even if it started on day number 2, would now end on day number 31. And he says an interesting migo, that since the second one would end the day after the first one, what we're going to do is we're going to count the first one, and we're going to say yesh neder besoch neder, and the second one is going to start on day number 31. That's what he says. But if you would say yesh neder, or if you would say nazir hayom, not nazir hayom, nazir lamachar, and then both of them would have to take effect on the same day, and on day number 30, both of them would seemingly be over. Over there, we don't say yesh neder besoch neder, and only one of them is chal today, and the second one is never chal. So again, Rav Huna is clarifying that when we say in the Mishnah yesh neder besoch neder, that's only when you say yesh neder. That's only when you say that I'm going hareini nazir hayom, hareini nazir lamachar. Because on day number 31, now the second one can kick in, the last day of the second one, but migo that the last day of the second one can kick in, we're going to start the second one from day number 31 until day number 60. But if you say hareini nazir hayom, according to Rav Huna, that would not be good. Because at the end of the day, you're saying the same exact thing twice, and we don't say that a neder is chal ala neder in that case.
So if you want to be makriv one korban?
No. You'd have to be makriv a korban after the first 30 days on day number 30, so 31, and then you'd have to be not. What?
That's what I'm saying. You're even though they overlap,
it doesn't matter. The first one's over. The second one would be, when the first one's over, you bring a korban. When the second one is over, you bring a korban. The whole point that he's saying is that the second one can only be chal because the first one's ending.
Right.
But Then I'm confused about if he says one today and one tomorrow.
That's when they go 30 and then 30. But if he says today, then it's only the first 30, and there's no.
So which one is the case where one starts on day one starts on day 2, one finishes on day 31?
He says migo, since it should have started on day number. One should have started on 1, and the second one should have started on day 2 and ended on day 31. Since the second one should have ended on day number 31, we're going to make it start on day number 31. However, if the second, so we're changing it. If the second one was supposed to end on day number 30 as well, then we would have never gone ahead and said that you have 2. What's the difference? You wouldn't have had to bring 2 korbanos according to Afuna, right? Ushmuel Amar. 1 second. Ushmuel Amar. Let's just see Shmuel. Afilu Amar Hareini Nazar Yom Chalal Nazirus Aleh. Shmuel disagrees and says when you say Hareini Nazar Yom 2 Nazirus are going to be Chal, and therefore what? Well, seemingly I would have said 1, but that's not what the Gemara seems to be saying. The Gemara seems to be saying that they're going to be Chal consecutively as well. However, it will be Chal consecutively even when you say Hareini Nazar Hayom, it'll be Chal consecutively even though you didn't have day number 31 for the second one to be Chal. Both of them are based, the Ran explains, both of them are based on the fact that by a Nazir, it says Nazir lahazir. It says the word twice, and therefore they can be Chal. The machlokas between Shmuel and Rav Huna is just whether when we say Hareini Nazir Hayom, that's enough to accomplish anything. According to Rav Huna, Hareini Nazir Hayom doesn't accomplish anything. And since the first one and second one should be Chal at the same time, we ignore the second Hareini Nazir Hayom, and you have 30 days. The only way you'd be able to have them back to back is Hareini Nazir Lamachar, where the first one would take place for the first 30 days, and then the second one would kick in on day number 31. And again, I would have thought it would end on day number 31, and the Chiddush is that it starts on day number 31. But according to Shmuel, Hareini Nazir Hayom is enough to say you're going to have 2 consecutive ones, and you're going to go 30 and then another 30.
I think the logic is that there's no such thing as one day of Naziris. So once you have to keep the 31st day, so now you have to keep the
Stam Naziris at 30 days.
Right, so,
right, but one could have argued that the 30-day periods can overlap. The Gemara is saying that they're not going to overlap.
But now that he has to keep one day, because it started on the second day, he has to keep one day longer, so that one day now obligates him to 30 days.
Right. Interesting.
If today the way according to Shmuel, not bring Korban second time, right? Only one.
No, twice.
No, Shmuel only
Twice. No, he's talking about the
Shmuel would say twice.
Hareini
Nazar Hayom. You're still going to cause you to go consecutively, and seemingly you're going to go 30 days and bring a korban, and then another 30 days and bring a korban. Both of them are it's going to come out with the same mitzias. The question is, how do you get there? How do you get to 30 and 30 back to back? According to Shmuel, either you say Hareini Nazar Hayom, or Hareini Nazar Hayom, Lamachar. According to Rav Huna, you only get to 30 and 30 back and back if you say Hareini Nazir Hayom, Hareini Nazir Lamachar. According to Shmuel, according to Rav Huna, if you say Hareini Nazir Hayom, Hareini Nazir Hayom, then we're not going to say Yesh Neder Chalal Neder. We're actually going to say Ein Neder Chalal Neder, similar to Ein Shvua Chalal Shvua. So the only machlokas is when you say Hareini Nazir Hayom, Hareini Nazir Hayom. According to Rav Huna, that doesn't accomplish anything. The second Hareini Nazir Hayom is as if you said Hareini Nazir Hayom, blah 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 blah, and you only have 30-day period. But according to Rav Huna, even when you say Hareini Nazir Hayom, it's as if you're saying Hareini Nazir for 30 days, and when those 30 days are over, Hareini Nazir for those 30 days as well. Again, when you think about it, Shmuel's a little bit of a chiddush, because you're saying Hareini Nazir Hayom. Seemingly you're just repeating yourself, and Rav Huna seems to make a little more sense. Shmuel says Hareini Nazir Hayom. Why would it go 30 and 30? But that's a chiddush that Shmuel said. That's a machlokas Shmuel and Rav Huna. But either way, the Mishnah says Ein Shua B'Soch Shua. They both work into the Mishnah. They're explaining what the Mishnah means when it says Yesh Neder B'Soch Neder. Rav Huna will say Yesh Neder B'Soch Neder means that the case is Hareini Nazir Hayom, Hareini Nazir Lamachar. Shmuel will say that the case in the Mishnah can even be Hareini Nazir Hayom, Hareini Nazir Hayom. Rav Huna will say no. The case in the Mishnah of Yesh Neder Achar Neder is Hareini Nazir Hayom, Hareini Nazir Lamachar. If you say Hareini Nazir Hayom, Hareini Nazir Hayom, that is a case of Ein Neder B'Soch Neder. And the Gemara is not saying Yesh Neder B'Soch Neder all the time. The Mishnah is not saying Yesh Neder B'Soch Neder all the time. The Gemara is saying there are cases of Yesh Neder B'Soch Neder, and then Ein Shua B'Soch Shua. And the Gemara is actually going to ask that question right now. That according to Rav Huna, what should the Mishnah have said? Yesh Neder B'Soch Neder, V'ein Neder B'Soch Neder, V'ein Shvua B'Soch Shua. There are cases where Neder B'Soch Neder, Hareini nazar hayom, hareini nazar lemachar. There are cases of ein neder b'soch neder where it's not going to work. Hareini nazar hayom, hareini nazar hayom. And then in general, all the time, no matter what you say, ein shua b'soch shua, hayom, machar, whatever, it's never going to work. That's the kasha of the Gemara. That's what the kasha is going to be on Rav Huna. Because according to Shmuel, the rule is the rule. Hareini nazar hayom, hareini nazar hayom. That works too, and therefore the rule yesh neder b'soch neder is always true. And it shouldn't say in the Mishnah ein neder b'soch neder because there are no cases like that. But according to Shmuel, yesh neder b'soch neder and ein shua b'soch shua. But according to Rav Huna, it should have said yesh neder b'soch neder, and there are also cases of ein neder b'soch neder, and in general ein shua b'soch shua. That's what the Gemara is going to ask right now. Okay, Ula Rav Huna Aditana. Once it's saying ein shua b'soch shua, listening it should have said, because again, if you're not going to mention ein shua b'soch shua, then Rav Huna can argue it just says yesh neder b'soch neder, and this Mishnah is just talking about those cases that have neder b'soch neder. It's not even discussing the cases of ein neder b'soch neder. But once you're telling me the case, or you're telling me the rule of ein shua b'soch shua, so then tell me ein neder b'soch neder sometimes as well, i.e. hareini nazar hayom, hareini nazar hayom. Ulu Rav Huna aditana ein shua b'soch shua listening yesh neder b'soch neder ve'ein neder b'soch neder, and then ein shua b'soch shua. Hareini nazar hayom, hareini nazar lemachar yesh neder b'soch neder. Hareini nazar hayom, hareini nazar hayom ein neder b'soch neder. The Gemara says kashya like teku. You're right. According to Rav Huna, the Mishnah should have added an extra line of yesh neder b'soch neder, and then it should have said also ein neder b'soch neder as well. T'nan. But we're not throwing out Rav Huna. So Tanan, the Mishnah says, Yesh neder b'soch neder ein shua b'soch shua. So now the Gemara is going to do something very interesting. The Gemara is going to say that if you're going to say ein neder b'soch neder, or yesh neder b'soch neder ein shua b'soch shua, the two cases need to be parallel to each other. That means whatever case you're saying, if you take a neder and another neder, it's going to work. It needs to be parallel to the case where if you take a shua and another shua, it's not going to work. So now we're going to try to figure out. So you can start one of two places. You could start by telling me what's the case of yesh neder b'soch neder, and then create a case of ein shua b'soch shua that's similar, but the din will be that the two of them are not going to be chal at the same time. Or you can tell me that the case of ein shua b'soch shua is, and then make the case of yesh neder b'soch neder being similar. Right? So let's start. Hey chidami, what's the case? E lima de amar hareini nazir hayom hareini nazir lemachar. Who's that? Well, that's everyone. Because again, Shmuel is the more mekil one, or machmer one, and Shmuel says that even if you say hareini nazar hayom, hareini nazar hayom, they're both going to be chal. But everyone agrees, even Rav Huna agrees, that if you say hareini nazar hayom, hareini nazar lemachar, it's going to be chal as well. So Lima de amar hareini nazar hayom, hareini nazar lemachar. I'm a nazir today, I'm a nazir tomorrow. That's the case of yesh neder b'soch neder, where they're going to be back to back. Because even according to Rav Huna, it's going to be chal. Because on day number 31, the second one will be chal, and it'll last for another 30 days. So what's the modern day or back then day equivalent of ein shvua b'soch shvua? De kavasa gabe shvua shelo ochel te'enim. I make a shvua that I won't eat te'enim, I won't eat figs. V'chazer v'amar shvua shelo ochel anavim. I'll take a shvua that I won't eat grapes. What's the problem with that? Amai lo chala shvua al shvua. If that's the case, where the parallel to saying hareini nazar hayom, hareini nazar lemachar, where we say yesh neder b'toch neder, they go back to back. The equivalent is shvua that I won't eat figs and shvua that I won't eat grapes. Then why would it be that a shvua ain't shvua chal al shvua? Why would the two shvuas not? They're two different shvuas. Why would the second shvua of not eating grapes not be chal? It's totally unrelated to the first shvua. So it can't be the equivalent. Now, looking from the outside, especially knowing what the Gemara is saying, but even not, it was a little bit of a weird suggestion to suggest this. Saying, I'm a nazir today, I'm a nazir tomorrow, is a little bit different than saying, shvua not to eat te'enim, shvua not to eat grapes. Right? But this is a kasha right now, as of now, it's a kasha on Rav Huna. Because what? Amai lo chala shua al shua. Because if you're setting up the yesh neder b'soch neder the way the Rav Huna is setting it up, hareini nazar hayom, hareini nazar lemachar, and the equivalent is shvua shelo ochel te'enim, shvua shelo ochel anavim, then why is the din in the Gemara ein shvua b'soch shvua? The second shvua should be chal. It's two different shvuas. So that can't be the case. So the Gemara says, Ella hechidami. What's the first case? De lo chala shua al shua. So now it's starting backwards. Saying rather, what must the case of lo chala shua al shua be? It must be Ella hechidami de lo chala shua al shua. Going to amar shvua shelo ochel te'enim. V'chazav amar shvua shelo ochel te'enim. I won't eat te'enim, I won't eat te'enim. So the Gemara, the Mishnah says, ein shvua chal al shvua, or ein shvua b'tzol shvua. And if you eat te'enim, you're only over one of them, because you said the same thing twice. So it's as if you said, I'm not going to eat Ta'anim, blah, 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 blah. And you're only going to be over once. What's the equivalent of Ochel Ta'anim and Ochel Ta'anim? Well, the equivalent of saying I won't eat Ta'anim is as saying I'm a Nazir today. What's the problem? Well, if I don't eat Ta'anim, I'm not going to eat Ta'anim. The rule is Ein Shvua B'Soch Shvua. Then if the equivalent of that is Hareini Nazir Hayom, that's what it means, Neder B'Soch Neder, then what does the Mishnah say? Yesh Neder B'Soch Neder. Who's that like? That's like Shmuel, who says Yesh Neder B'Soch Neder, even when they say Hareini Nazir Hayom. What's Rav Huna going to say? Rav Huna says Hareini Nazir Hayom is not going to work. Only Hareini Nazir Lamachar. So Rav Huna is struggling, or the Gemara is struggling to figure out how Rav Huna can hold. Rav Huna needs to hold that Yesh Neder B'Soch Neder is Hareini Nazir Lamachar. But how can he have the equivalent? Because the only case we could think of where Shvua would not be B'Soch Shvua would be Ta'anim. But the equivalent of Ta'anim is Hayom. But Hayom, you said Ein Neder B'Soch Neder. You're only saying Neder B'Soch Neder by Hayom L'machar. But the equivalent of Hayom L'machar would be Ta'anim Anavim. But if Ta'anim Anavim is the equivalent of Hayom L'machar, then Ta'anim Anavim should be Yeshua B'Soch Shvua. Fine. Kashila Rafuna. So it's a Kashila Rafuna. Amar L'cha Rafuna, so Rafuna will answer the following. Masnisan Damar, again, he's going to have to go back and he's going to start, he's saying, don't start by Shua B'Soch Shua. Start by Neder B'Soch Neder. And explain me that one, and then find me the equivalent of Shua B'Soch Shua. Amar L'cha Rafuna, Masnisan Damar Hareini Nazir Hayom Hareini Nazir Lamachar, like I said. De Kavasa Gabe Shua, you originally said Hareini Nazir Hayom Hareini Nazir Lamachar, the equivalent of Shua is Ta'anim, and then Anavim, and obviously that should be Chal. De Kavasa Gabe Shua, De Amar Shelo Ochel Ta'anim, it's a little bit hard to understand this Svara, but the equivalent of Hareini Nazir Hayom Hareini Nazir Lamachar is first saying I won't eat Ta'anim, and then saying Shvua Shela Ochel Ta'anim ve'anavim, and then saying I'll take a Shvua that I won't eat Ta'anim and Anavim. Now seemingly Ta'anim u'anavim ve'anavim doesn't mean Ta'anim or Anavim, it means Ta'anim and Anavim. So again, and it makes sense if you think about it for a second. So again, he's saying the first case of Yesh Neder B'Soch Neder is when the guy says, I'm a Nazir today, I'm a Nazir tomorrow. And that kicks in 30 and then 30. So it's similar but different. They're both similar topics of Nazirus, but one is about today, one is about tomorrow. Similarly, when we say Ein Shvua B'Soch Shvua, it's similar topics but not exactly the same. One Shvua is I won't eat Ta'anim. One Shvua is that I won't eat Ta'anim and Anavim. So he's saying since the second Shua is similar but not exactly the same, even though by Nazirus we say Yesh Neder B'Soch Neder because of the special limud in the pasuk of Lahazir Nazir, whatever the pasuk is. I'll quote it right. Pasuk is Ish ki afli lidor neder nazir lahazir. So there's a special drasha that we can say that even though they're not exactly the same, Hareini Nazir Hayom Hareini Nazir Lamachar, they're going to work 1, 30, and then 30. But that's not going to work by Shvua. And by saying Shua Eini Ochel Ta'anim, Shua Eini Ochel Ta'anim V'Anavim is the equivalent of saying Shua Eini Ochel Ta'anim, Shua Eini Ochel Ta'anim, which is not Chal. And therefore you're able to work out where the Mishnah, when it says Yesh Neder B'Soch Neder, that's the case according to Rav Huna of Hareini Nazir Hayom Hareini Nazir Lamachar. What's the equivalent of similar but not exactly the same when you say the two things similar but not exactly the same? Where it says Ve'ein Shua B'Soch Shua. The equivalent of Hareini Nazir Hayom Hareini Nazir Lamachar, where we say Ein Shua B'Soch Shua, is Shua Shela Ochel Ta'anim, Shua Shela Ochel Ta'anim Ve'anavim. And therefore Shua, if you're saying Ein Shua B'Soch Shua, then the second Shua of Ta'anim and Anavim is not Chal. Therefore if you go ahead now and you eat Ta'anim, you're only going to be over one Shua. If you go ahead now and eat Anavim, you're not over any Shuas, because the second Shua wasn't Chal. What do you say? I'm sorry.
Yeah, why shouldn't it be Chal? The Anavim.
Again, because of the fact that
it's a separate shua.
It is a separate shua, but he said that the chiddush, because it's similar to the first shua, because you're mentioning Ta'anim as well, his chiddush is that Ein Shvua B'Soch Shvua.
So what is it not? What is it so different that it will be two separate shuas? For example, I'll say
Shvua She'eino Ochel Ta'anim, Shvua Shelo Ochel Anavim. Everybody agrees that that's going to be two different shuas.
Let's say I'll add something totally different, like Eino Ochel Basar.
Again, I don't know. I don't know the Matthias.
Along with it.
But it sounds like his chiddush is that once you're mentioning the first thing,
As soon as you mention
as soon as you mention the first thing, or there's anything to do with the first thing, it's like throwing out the second one. So that's how Rav Huna is going to answer you. Obviously, Shmuel is going to answer you no. Yesh neder besoch neder means hareini nazir hayom, hareini nazir hayom, and ein shvua besoch shvua is the equivalent of shvua sheino ochel teinim, shvua sheino ochel teinim. Why does it work by Nazir and not by Shvua, and not by Shvua, by the Te'inim? Because by Nazir we have the special thing, Nazir lahazir. That's what Shmuel will tell you. But Rav Huna was able to answer at least that thing. Now there's only one problem, and it's not really a problem, but the Gemara is going to basically say that Rav Huna doesn't hold like Rabba. Because we're going to see that Rabba holds that when you say Shvua shel ochel te'enim, Shvua shel ochel te'enim ve'anavim, Rabba is going to hold that the second Shvua is chal. Okay, seemingly, I don't know what Shmuel would hold in that case, but it doesn't really matter. And again, we're not rejecting Rav Huna here, we're just pointing out that he doesn't fit in with Rabba. Why does he not fit in with Rabba? Rabba said, Shua shel ochel te'enim v'chazvar mar shua shel ochel te'enim v'anavim v'achal te'enim. Listen what happened. Shua shel ochel te'enim, shua shel ochel te'enim v'anavim. What happened? Now he eats te'enim. How many is he going to be over? Well, according to Rav Huna, he's only over one. The first one, the second one was never chal. It was ein shua b'soch shua. According to Rabba, what's the din here? Well, hifrish korban. Now he sets aside a korban. V'chazar v'achal anavim. And he goes ahead and now he eats anavim. Havya lehu anavim chatzi shir. Now the anavim is only half of the shvua because it was anavim and te'enim. Ve'ein meviim korban al chatzi shir. And you don't bring a korban for half of a shir. Alma, however, heicha de amar shvua shel ochel te'enim v'chazav amar shvua shel ochel te'enim ve'anavim migo dechal shvua al anavim chay lenami al te'enim. And the Gemara answers, Rav Huna lo sfiro le karabba. I'll explain it in a second. But again, what do you see from Rabba? Rabba says if you take a shvua not to eat te'enim, you take a shvua not to eat te'enim and anavim. So what would you say? If Rabba holds like Rav Huna, or if Rav Huna holds like Rabba, what would be the din there? The din there would be that the second shvua is basically blah, 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 blah. And if you eat te'enim and anavim, then what happens? You're over the first shvua. You never took a shvua not to eat anavim, because the second one never was chal. According to what Rabba says that if you take a shua not to eat te'enim, then you take a shua not to eat te'enim and anavim, Rabba actually says that you should be chayav, when you eat te'enim and anavim, you should be chayav 2 korbanos. You should be over 2 shvuas. He says that logistically, in this case, you're not over 2. Why? Because after you ate the Tanaim. After you, hopefully you're not eating the Tanaim. After you eat the Ta'anim, what happened? You separated a korban. Once you separate the korban, so let's think what happens, let's back up. You ate the Ta'anim. You're over the first shvua. Even if you would hold that the second shvua is chal, you're still not over the second shvua, because you said I won't eat Ta'anim ve'anavim. And everybody agrees you're not going to be chayav the second shvua until you eat Ta'anim and anavim. Now you eat Ta'anim. You set aside a korban. That korban, basically, for all intents and purposes, the way that Rabbi is explaining it, gets rid of whatever isser action you did by eating te'enim. So in this case, the korban gets rid of the fact that you took a shvua not to eat te'enim. The korban takes care of that. And the korban seemingly takes care of the fact that you ate te'enim for the second shvua of, I'm not going to eat te'enim or anavim. After you set aside the korban and now you eat anavim, so Rabbi says, you're not over the first shvua. The first shvua is gone because you already brought a korban for it. The second shvua now you're not over because you ate te'enim and anavim, but you already brought a korban that covered both the first te'enim and the te'enim in the second shvua. So now logistically you're not going to be over the second shvua because even though you ate anavim, you still haven't eaten te'enim. But we see that what Rava holds is that if you wouldn't have separated a korban and you would have eaten te'enim and then you would have eaten anavim, if the korban wasn't getting rid of the te'enim part of the second shvua, then the anavim that you then eat will in fact make you chayav even for the second shvua. We see that shvua is chal al shua, and even though you said eini ochel te'enim v'anavim, the second one was chal, and as soon as you eat te'enim and anavim, the second one is going to be chal, and you're going to be over both of them. According to Rav Huna, that's not true, because Rav Huna said that in the second case, he just finished telling you that the second case where you say te'enim and then te'enim v'anavim, Rav Huna just finished telling you that the second one of te'enim v'anavim is not going to be chal, and even if you would eat te'enim and anavim, you're only chal, you're only over the first one. That's the machlokes. But again, it's a logistic point, and that's where we see from Rabbah. It's a logistic point where Rabbah says, let's just read it inside. Again, Amalacha Rafuna. Back up. We'll just read the whole Gemara. Masnisan da Amar Reini Nazar Yom Reini Nazar Lemachar Dikavasa Gabe Shvua da Amar Shlo Ochel Te'inim V'Chazer Amar Shvua Shlo Ochel Te'inim V'Anavim Delo Chayla. He's saying our Mishnah which says Yesh Neder B'Tzoch Neder Hareini Nazar Yom Reini Nazar Lemachar, that's going to work. However, Ein Shvua B'Tzoch Shvua means if you take a Shvua Shlo Ochel Te'inim, a Shvua Shlo Ochel Te'inim V'Anavim, and then you eat Te'inim or Te'inim and Anavim, it's not going to be Chayla. You're only going to have to do the first one, because when you said Ochel Te'inim Anavim, once you mention Te'inim again, it's thrown out. V'ha'amar Rabba, when he says the same exact case, Shvua Shelo Ochel Te'inim, V'chazer V'amar, Shvua Shelo Ochel Te'inim Anavim, V'achal Te'inim, and again, according to Afuna, even V'achal Te'inim V'anavim, you would only be Chayiv for the first one, because the second one was never Chal. But Rabba says, when you're Achal Te'inim, V'hifrish Korban, and you set aside a Korban now, V'chazar V'achal Anavim, now you go ahead and eat grapes. Now, Havu Huluhu Anavim Chatzi Shur. The Anavim are only Chatzi Shur. The Anavim in the second one are only half of the second one, because the second one said, I won't eat Anavim or Te'anim. It sounds like what Rabbi is saying, you already brought a Korban for the Te'anim in the first one and for the Te'anim in the second one. Ve'ein Meviim Korban Al Chatzi Shur, now that you ate the Anavim. Alma, but we see, Heicha de Amar Shua Shel Ochel Te'anim V'chazer V'amar Shua Shel Ochel Te'anim V'anavim, we see Migo Dechal we see that according to Rabbi, the second one was Chal, and the only reason you don't have to bring another Korban is because you had already brought a Korban which got rid of the Te'anim part of the second Shvua, and now when you eat Anavim, you still haven't eaten Te'anim. But theoretically, he's saying, if you didn't bring a Korban, then the second one was Chal right away, and if you would say, Eini Ochel Te'anim, Eini Ochel Te'anim V'Anavim, and now you eat Te'anim and Anavim, according to Afuna, you're only going to be over the first Shvua because the second Shvua was never Chal. According to Rabba, the second Shvua was Chal, and since you didn't bring a Korban in between, the Te'anim that you eat are going to be over the first Shvua and half of the second Shvua, and the Anavim that you eat are going to be over the second half of the second Shvua, and you'll have to bring 2 Korbanos. That's where we see that Rafuna doesn't hold like Rabba. Again, it doesn't throw out Rafuna, but the way that Rafuna is explaining our Mishnah is not like Rabba.
So in the Shvua or in the Neder, there's no time frame. So if every day you have a tithe and you eat Te'anim, you have to bring another Korban?
So it sounds like once you eat it, so it's done.
That's the end of the Shvua?
Sounds like it, yeah. I don't know. I don't know for sure, but that's what the Gemara seems to be saying.
Because if it were the case that you would have to, if it's not done,
right,
you would have to bring each day. Then eating the second.
Right, but it doesn't matter. In this case, it doesn't matter because once you bring the Korban, you're basically done with the Shvua. But it makes like the Gemara sounding like once you eat the Te'anim, you're over the Shvua. Once you're over the Shvua, that's it. It's not every single time.
Can you explain what's meant by Chatzi Shir? In other words, if I have tremendous amount of grapes.
That's not what he's talking about. He's not talking about Chatzi Shir here, like on Yom Kippur, where you don't eat Kazayas.
Right?
Right?
What's Chatzi Shir mean?
Chatzi Shir means that... No, Chatzi Shir means half of a Shir. So when we talk about Yom Kippur, if you're only allowed to eat a Kazayas on Yom Kippur, so if somebody's sick, we'll say Pachos Mikashir. Right. Eat half of a Shir, eat half of a Kazayas, and then wait 8 minutes or whatever, Kedei Achilas Pras, and then eat another. So in our case here, the Shir, to be over the second Neder, is Te'anim and Anavim. When you eat the Anavim, you're only over half of the shear that you would be over, not half of the Anavim, you're only over one of the 2, half of the shear. The shear to be over the second Shua is to eat grapes and figs. When you eat only grapes, so you're only over half of the shear. You're over the grape part, you're over the grape part of the Shua, not the fig part of the Shua. That's what Chatzi Shir he means.
Maybe the word shear is throwing off. It's not really the shear as much as it's
right.
The Shua.
Usually it's Chatzi Shir means if you have a thing of grapes, to eat half of the barrel of grapes. Over here it really means Chatzi Shvua. Right, here it basically means Chatzi Shvua. That you ate the grapes.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
You only ate half of the shear. And you're saying you're not going to be over the second Shvua because you only violated half of that second Shvua. You ate Te'anim too, but you already brought a Korban for the Te'anim.
So it's dates and grapes, not dates or grapes.
That's the way that I'm understanding the Gemara, because if it was either or, then it doesn't matter that you're only over half. Half is the whole thing. If or, then each one is 100%. But it sounds like dates and grapes. And again, I think that everyone, Rav Huna would say no matter what you eat at this point, even if you ate a combination of dates and grapes together, after you brought the Korban, you're still not over because, again, the second one was never Chal. Rabba would agree that if you eat figs, we're not talking about dates, figs, if you eat figs, and then you bring the Korban, and now you eat figs and grapes together, he'll agree that the second one you're going to be over. Because the second one was Chal. The problem here is that you ate the figs, you brought the Korban, and now you're only eating the grapes. But if you would eat the figs and the grapes again, after eating the figs and bringing korban, now you ate figs and grapes, now you're over the second shvua, which is still chal. But either way, we see that Rav Huna doesn't hold like Rabbah.
Once you bring the korban, it finishes that.
Again, bringing the korban, because in this case what you did was you ate the figs, then you brought the korban,
Right.
now you only ate grapes. But if you would eat the figs, bring the korban, and then eat figs and grapes again, then you would be over the second shvua. The korban got rid of the fig part for wherever you needed figs. So it got rid of the first shvua, which was I won't eat figs. It gets rid of that. And it got rid of whatever isser you were over by eating figs as part of the second shvua.
Right.
It didn't get rid of the second shvua. It just got rid of eating the fig part of the second shvua.
But it had to get rid of the second shvua.
Why?
Because if you're saying once you bring the korban, or once you declare the korban for the figs part, and that ends the...
Again, that ends where the shvua was just I won't eat figs.
Right, but then...
It doesn't end...
Yeah, but then the second one only has the grape aspect to it, and if you're eating the grapes and it's nothing, then it's nothing. It can't...
I hear. Okay, it's not 100% clear what would happen in that case, where you then went ahead and ate the grapes and the figs.
Right.
Unclear. But I would... What does he say?
He says you're not chayiv because it's two separate actions.
You wouldn't be chayav if you would eat the grapes and the figs again afterwards?
No,
the question is if you're eating grapes and figs after you eat the figs. The pashup shot, the way that we're learning, is you're not chayiv because it's two separate actions. You ate the figs, you brought the korban, it got rid of that. Now when you eat the grapes, you still haven't eaten the figs part of the second shvua. The question is if you would eat the figs, bring the korban, and now eat figs and grapes together, seemingly I'm suggesting you would be over, because I don't think that the korban is getting rid of the shvua. It's bringing a kapara for the fact that you were over the first shvua.
But if it ends, as you
again, it might not. So then maybe I didn't word it right. Maybe it's not ending the shvua. It's bringing a kapara for the fact that you were over the first shvua. Now that's out because you brought a kapara for that. You didn't yet need a kapara for this shvua. But somehow the korban, the Gemara is learning, the korban breaks it up. Again, that's not important for our discussion. The important part of our discussion is that Rav Huna is not like Rabbi. And Rabbi said that if there was no korban involved here, Lamaisa, the second shvua, would be chal. Because once you said figs, and now you added figs and grapes, so then you're adding something, and that's where shvua is chal, even b'soch shvua. He would agree, even Rabbi would agree, the other way, the other extreme, even Rabbi would agree, I won't eat figs, I won't eat figs. In that case, it's not going to be chal. Ein shvua chal al shvua, or ein shvua b'soch shvua. But either way, that's where we have. So let's just finish up here. Meisvei. Again, we said Rav Huna lo svir like Rabba. So now we have another meisvei. They're picking on Rav Huna today. Another meisvei on Rav Huna. Again, Rav Huna said that the case of yesh neder b'soch neder is only hareini nazar hayom, hareini nazar lamachar. Even if you would say hareini nazar, hareini nazar hayom, hareini nazar hayom, that would be the equivalent of ein ochel to einim, ein ochel to einim, which everyone agrees ein shvua b'soch shvua. And therefore, he says that yesh neder b'soch neder is dafka when you say hareini nazar hayom, hareini nazar lamachar. Meisvei on Rav Huna, misha nazar shtei naziros. If you count 2 naziros, manes harishona v'hifresh korban, you count 30 days, and you set aside a korban v'nishal aleha, and now after setting aside a korban, you raised up your hands and said, wait, there's a loophole, I made a mistake, the first one was never chal, also lo shnia barishona. Again, what did we say before? You said if you have 2 of them that are going to be chal, then they're going to be chal consecutively, 30 and then 30. What happens if you do 2 of them? Which seemingly, the question seems to be based on what did you do here? Hareini nazar hayom, hareini nazar hayom. According to Rav Huna, there's nothing to talk about. According to Rav Huna, there was nothing chal. There was only 1 chal. According to Rabba, according to Shmuel, hareini nazar hayom, hareini nazar hayom, what happens? You do 30 and then another 30. So what's the case here? And let's see who this works out with. Misha nazar shtei naziros. The person said hareini nazar hayom, hareini nazar hayom. Manes harishona. You count the first one, now you count 30 days. So, what happened? Well, according to Rav Huna, you're done. According to Shmuel, now you got to start counting another 30 days for the second one. V'hifresh korban. At the end of 30 days, you put aside a korban. V'nishal aleha. Now you realize that the first shvua that you took, hareini nazar hayom, was done with your fingers crossed. And you were going like this, and you didn't really mean it. And therefore, hareini nazar hayom, hareini nazar hayom. We found a loophole in the first shvua. Now he's saying, the Gemara is saying, you can retroactively count the 30 days that you just counted for the second shvua, hareini nazar hayom. Also lo shnia barishona. Okay. What does this show? Well, this shows that both of them were chal. Because according to Rav Huna, what does that mean? Also lo shnia barishona. According to Rav Huna, when I said hareini nazar hayom, hareini nazar hayom, and then we find the first one to be null and void. So, what do you mean? The second one is counted for the first 30. What do you mean? The first 30 doesn't count for the second one. The second one was never chal, according to Rafuna. According to Shmuel, Haredi Nazar Yom, Haredi Nazar Yom, both of them are chal. When you find the first one to be flawed, so then we could say the 30 days you just counted works for the second one. But this is a clear proof against Rafuna, who would hold that the second one never took effect. So what does that mean? Al Salo Shnia Barishona. Hey Chidami, what's the case? A Lima de Amar. If you say like Rafuna is going to tell you, our Mishnah is de Amar Hareni Nazar Yom Hareni Nazar Lamachar. When it says that he's Nazar Shtei Nazirus, it means he said Hareni Nazar Yom Hareni Nazar Machar. Amai Al Salo Shnia Barishona Ha'ika Yoma Yisera. Now you have a little bit of a problem. Because if Rafuna, you're going to say, if he said Hareni Nazar Yom Hareni Nazar Yom, then you have a problem. Because then what does that mean also low that the 30 days count for the second one? There was no second one. So what must the case be? The case must be according to you, Hareni Nazar Hayom, Hareni Nazar Lamachar. What happens at the end of 30 days if you find out that the first Nazirus was not Chal? So then the Gemara says, also lo shniya rishona. You can count the first 30 days for the second swear, because again he agrees Hareni Nazar Lamachar is going to be the second, it's going to be Chal. But the Gemara says that's a problem because Amai also lo shniya rishona ha'ika yoma yiseri. You're on day number 30 now. Even if you're going to say, even Rafuna agrees Hareni Nazar Hayom Hareni Nazar Lamachar, that what? The second one kicks in. When does it kick in? The second one kicks in on day number 31. How on day number 30 can you say that the first 30 days count for the second shua? The second shua, according to Rafuna, didn't start until the second day. Well, again, started the second day, ends on day number 31, and then we said since it's ending on day number 31, it's really starting on day number 31. But how can you say that the first 30 days counts for the second shua if the second shua didn't even start yet? It starts on day number 31. Right? You have one day there. You understanding what I'm saying here? So again, Rafuna can't hold that this brisa Misha Nazar Shtei Naziros means Hareni Nazar Yom Hareni Nazar Hayom, because if you say like that, so then he holds the second one is never Chal. So what does it mean that the 30 days works for the second Shua? We have no second Naziros here. There was no second Naziros. So it must be that the case is when he said Hareni Nazar Hayom Hareni Nazar Lamachar. If he says Hareni Nazar Hayom Hareni Nazar Lamachar, and the Gemara says then there's a problem, because then the Gemara is saying now comes day number 30. On day number 30 you find that there's a problem with the first shua that you took. So Rafuna will say you're right. Hareni Nazar Yom Hareni Nazar Lamachar, the second shua takes effect in that case, because Yesh Neder B'Sof Neder in that case. But on day number 30, how can we say that the first 30 days counts for the second shua? The second shua doesn't end until day number 31 at the very least, which we said then means it starts on day number 31. So even if you want to say that the first 30 days works for the second shua, you still have at least one day left in the Naziros, because it didn't start till day number 2. So the Gemara says, it's postured that the case here means Hareni Nazar Yom Hareni Nazar Lahom, and then we're saying also lo shniya barishona tiyufta de Rafuna. It's a tiyufta on Rafuna because again, according to him, there is no second shvur here. There is no second Naziros. Lo. So the Gemara gives two answers. Laolam Hareni Nazar Yom Hareni Nazar Lamachar. Umay alsalo. What does it mean that you count the first 30 days for the second shvua? Lebar me'ahu yoma yisera. You're right. You start counting the 30 days from day number 2, and therefore now on day number 30, when you found that the first shvua wasn't chal, so over here, what are you going to do? You'll wait till tomorrow on day number 31. Once day number 31 counts, now that you did 2 to 31, that was the second Naziros. Why was the second Naziros chal? Because Hareni Nazar Yom Hareni Nazar Lamachar. Says Rafuna, another possibility, Inami kigon shekibel shtei Naziros bevazacha. No, that's not the case here. The case here is not that he said Hareni Nazar Yom Hareni Nazar Lamachar. That's a problem. No, because in this case he didn't say Hareni Nazar Yom Hareni Nazar Yom either, which would have been a problem according to it. What did he say here? Hareni Nazir Shtei Naziros. I'm going to be Nazir 2 Naziros. If you're going to be Nazir 2 Naziros, then everyone agrees. Even Rafuna agrees that both of them are going to be chal right away. And therefore, if the second one retroactively is a problem, then if the first one is retroactively not a real shvua, not a real Naziros, then the second one can be counted from those 30 days. Shkayach, we'll pick up here tomorrow.